Have you ever ignored someone because they looked ordinary, only to discover they had lived through something extraordinary? What if the quietest nurse in a hospital was hiding a past that could change everyone's life in a single moment? At exactly 5 o'clock in the morning, the city was still asleep. Rain covered the empty streets, and the windows of St. Gabriel Veterans Medical Center reflected the soft orange lights from nearby buildings. Inside a small apartment across the river, Nora Hayes slowly opened her eyes before her alarm clock had a chance to ring. She stayed still for a few seconds. Every morning began the same way. She listened. Silence meant another peaceful day. No explosions. No helicopters. No shouting. Only rain. Nora smiled gently and sat up. Beside her bed stood an old walking cane that she almost never used. Her left leg had healed after years of surgeries, but long shifts still reminded her that some injuries never truly disappeared. She quietly prepared a cup of coffee and looked at a framed photograph on the kitchen shelf. The picture showed 5 smiling people standing beside a rescue helicopter. Their uniforms carried no names, and every face except hers had been carefully covered with small pieces of paper. She had done that herself years ago. Some memories were safer when they remained unfinished. As she picked up her hospital bag, her phone displayed the date. Today. She stared at the screen longer than usual. The date always brought back memories she tried hard to bury. She locked the apartment door and stepped into the cold morning air without another word. Traffic was light as Nora drove toward the hospital. The radio talked about weather, sports, and politics, but she switched it off. She preferred silence. It allowed her to notice everything. A flat tire on a delivery truck. An elderly man waiting too long at a crosswalk. A little girl waving at every passing car. Small details mattered. Years ago, noticing small details had saved lives. At 6 o'clock sharp, she entered St. Gabriel Veterans Medical Center through the staff entrance. The security guard smiled. "Morning, Nora." "Morning, Ben. You ready for another busy day?" She laughed softly. "When is it ever quiet around here?" Ben chuckled and opened the security gate. The hospital was already alive. Doctors hurried between departments. Wheelchairs rolled through bright hallways. Coffee machines worked harder than anyone else in the building. Nora loved this place. Not because it was easy, because every person inside carried a story. Room 214. An elderly veteran had suddenly become confused. When Nora entered the room, several young staff members were trying to calm the frightened man. He pushed their hands away. "Stay back," he shouted. "They're still out there." One nurse looked helpless. He nodded. "Battlefields don't have clocks like this." His eyes blinked. "You smell coffee?" Another slow nod. "Battlefields don't smell like fresh coffee either." The shaking became weaker. "You're safe," Nora whispered. "You're in a hospital. Not alone." The veteran slowly lowered his hands. Tears rolled down his face. "I thought I was back there." "You came home," Nora answered. "And today you're staying home." The room became completely silent. Even the young doctors watched without speaking. One nurse whispered to another. How did she know exactly what to say? No one had an answer. Nora simply smiled at the old veteran as she adjusted his blanket. Outside the room, several staff members stared after her with quiet admiration. None of them realized that this ordinary nurse carried secrets that reached far beyond hospital walls. And before the day ended, those secrets would refuse to stay hidden any longer. Nora stepped out of room 214 and quietly closed the door behind her. The hallway buzzed with conversations, rolling stretchers and ringing phones, but for a moment, she simply leaned against the wall and took a slow breath. Her pager vibrated again. Emergency department. Assistance requested. She adjusted her badge and walked quickly toward the elevators. Inside the emergency department, controlled chaos filled every corner. A construction worker with a broken arm sat beside a retired firefighter suffering from chest pain. A young mother comforted her injured son while doctors hurried from one bed to another. "Nora," called Dr. Ethan Brooks. She looked up. "We've got 3 ambulances arriving in 5 minutes. I'm ready." The sliding doors opened almost immediately. The first patient was an elderly veteran who had collapsed while shopping. The second was a teenage cyclist with multiple fractures. The third ambulance carried a middle-aged man who had suffered severe smoke inhalation after rescuing his neighbors from a house fire. Without hesitation, Nora moved between patients, helping wherever she was needed. She never raised her voice. She never panicked. She simply worked. Nearly an hour later, the emergency room finally became quieter. Dr. Brooks handed Nora a bottle of water. "You haven't stopped since you arrived." She smiled. "Neither have you." He laughed. "Fair enough." Before either of them could continue, Hospital Director Margaret Collins entered the department with 2 security officers. Every staff member immediately noticed the serious expressions on their faces. "Attention, everyone," Margaret announced. "Tomorrow morning our hospital will host a special guest." Doctors and nurses gathered around. A nationally respected humanitarian, General Adrian Carter, will visit to announce a new rehabilitation program for injured veterans. Whispers spread across the room. General Carter was famous not only for his military service, but also for building rehabilitation centers across the country. Margaret continued. "Because of the visit, additional security will be present throughout the hospital." One nurse whispered excitedly, "I've only seen him on television." Another smiled. "My grandfather served with him years ago." Nora remained completely silent. Her expression changed so slightly that almost no one noticed. Almost. Dr. Brooks did. "You okay?" "I've fine." "You don't sound convinced." "It's just another visitor." He studied her face. "You usually smile when veterans come here." She looked away. "Some visitors bring back old memories." Before he could ask another question, Margaret handed everyone updated schedules. "Nora, I'd like you assigned to the rehabilitation wing tomorrow." Nora, "Yes. It's closest to the ceremony." Margaret smiled warmly. "I trust you with our patients more than anyone." Nora accepted the schedule without another word. Inside, however, something felt wrong. She couldn't explain why. Only that a quiet voice inside her kept whispering. "Leave." She ignored it. Because nurses didn't walk away when people needed them. Enjoying the mystery? Hit like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss the next chapter where everything begins to change. Later that afternoon, Nora visited the physical therapy department. One of her regular patients, Mr. Henry Lawson, struggled to stand using parallel bars. "You've improved," Nora encouraged. Henry shook his head. "I still feel weak." "Strength isn't measured by how fast you walk." "Then how?" "By refusing to stop trying." He smiled. "You always know the right thing to say." She laughed softly. "I've had good teachers." As she adjusted the support belt around his waist, an old maintenance worker entered carrying a toolbox. He accidentally dropped a heavy wrench. The loud crash echoed through the therapy room. Several patients barely reacted. Nora did. She instinctively stepped between the sound and her patients, scanning every doorway before realizing where she was. The room became silent. Henry looked at her with surprise. That wasn't a normal reaction. Nora slowly relaxed. "I guess loud noises still catch me off guard." The maintenance worker apologized. "I'm sorry, nurse. It's all right." But inside, she knew that wasn't the truth. That single metallic sound had awakened memories she had spent years trying to bury. Outside the hospital, dark clouds gathered over the city once again. Across the street, a black SUV stopped for only a few seconds. A man wearing sunglasses looked toward St. Gabriel Veterans Medical Center before driving away. No one inside noticed. Not even the security guards. But somewhere, events had already begun moving toward a moment that would test every promise Nora had ever made. To protect others before herself. The next morning arrived with thick gray clouds hanging over the city. A cool breeze carried the smell of rain as hospital employees hurried through the front entrance, each one preparing for what was expected to be an important day. Nora arrived earlier than usual. She liked having a few quiet minutes before the halls filled with voices. As she placed her bag inside her locker, she noticed a small envelope resting on the shelf. There was no name on it. No stamp. Only a single sentence written in neat black ink. Some promises never disappear. She stared at the message. It felt strangely familiar. But before she could think about it any longer, her pager vibrated. Rehabilitation wing. She folded the paper, slipped it into her pocket, and walked away. She never noticed someone watching her from the end of the hallway. The rehabilitation center was already busy. Patients practiced walking with therapists. Others worked on hand exercises or learned to use new prosthetic limbs. Nora moved from one room to another, greeting everyone by name. "Good morning, Mr. Lawson." "You remembered my birthday," the old veteran smiled. "You mentioned it 3 months ago." "You remember everything." "I remember people." He laughed. "That's even better." Nearby, a young former firefighter named Chris struggled to lift a lightweight exercise bar. "I can't do it," he sighed. Nora pulled up a chair beside him. "Yesterday you lifted it for 5 seconds. Only 5. Today make it 6. Chris smiled. "You always make impossible things sound easy." "No." She shook her head. "I just believe small victories become big ones." Chris took a deep breath and lifted the bar again. 6 seconds. Then 7. The therapist clapped. Chris looked at Nora with surprise. "I actually did it." "You did." "Not me. You." The room filled with applause from other patients. For a few moments, the hospital forgot about ceremonies, important visitors, and security plans. Everyone simply celebrated one man's progress. Around 10 o'clock, additional security officers entered the building. Metal detectors were checked. Entrance doors were monitored. Visitors passed through extra screening. Director Margaret Collins walked through every department making sure everything was ready. 5 minutes, she announced. "Everyone stay calm and continue your normal duties." Nora nodded without speaking. Her pocket felt heavier. She could still feel the folded note inside her uniform. She wanted to throw it away. Instead, she kept touching it every few minutes, almost as if she feared it might disappear. Outside the hospital, several black vehicles slowly entered the parking area. Reporters gathered near the entrance. Camera crews prepared their equipment. Patients watched through large windows with curiosity. General Adrian Carter stepped out of the lead vehicle wearing a simple dark blue suit instead of a military uniform. His silver hair reflected the morning light. Although retired for years, he still carried himself with calm confidence. He shook hands with hospital staff before entering the main lobby. Everyone applauded politely. Everyone. Except Nora. She quietly turned and continued arranging medication inside a nearby treatment room. She hoped the ceremony would end quickly. She hoped no one would notice her. She hoped today would simply become another ordinary workday. Sometimes hope isn't enough. Meanwhile, in another part of the hospital, a maintenance technician examined electrical panels in the basement. He had worked there for nearly 3 weeks. Most employees knew him only as Daniel. Quiet. Helpful. Always smiling. But the ID badge clipped to his uniform wasn't real. Neither was his name. He opened a small notebook hidden inside his toolbox. On one page was a rough sketch of the hospital's lower level. Several hallways had been marked with red circles. He slowly crossed one circle out with a pencil, then another. Finally, he whispered to himself, "Only one route left." He closed the notebook just as another employee walked into the room. "Everything all right?" Daniel smiled naturally. "Just replacing an old power switch." "Thanks." "No problem." As soon as the man left, Daniel's smile disappeared. He looked toward the ceiling, toward the floors above, toward the ceremony. He quietly closed his toolbox. At exactly the same moment upstairs, General Carter began speaking with patients. He greeted each veteran personally. He listened more than he talked. When he reached Mr. Lawson's wheelchair, he noticed Nora helping adjust the elderly man's blanket. For a brief second, his eyes stopped moving. He looked at Nora carefully. She looked up. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. But something changed in General Carter's expression. Recognition. Not complete. Not certain. Just enough to make him wonder. "Have we met before?" Nora's heartbeat suddenly became louder. She forced a small smile. "I don't think so, sir." General Carter nodded politely. "Perhaps you're right." He continued walking. but after only a few steps. He quietly looked back at her one more time. Something about the quiet nurse seemed impossible to forget. And somewhere below the hospital, the man calling himself Daniel locked his toolbox, checked his watch and whispered, "It's almost time." Far above him, no one knew that before the afternoon ended, St. Gabriel Veterans Medical Center would become the center of an event that would test courage, loyalty, and the hidden strength of one ordinary nurse with an extraordinary past. The applause echoed through the rehabilitation center as General Adrian Carter continued greeting patients one by one. Reporters followed at a respectful distance while hospital staff smiled for cameras. Everything appeared calm, but Nora couldn't shake the strange feeling growing inside her. The anonymous note in her pocket seemed heavier with every passing minute. She quietly stepped into the medication room, closed the door, and unfolded the paper once more. The same sentence stared back at her. Some promises never disappear. She turned the note over. This time she noticed something she had missed before. A tiny hand-drawn lighthouse in one corner. Her heart skipped a beat. She had seen that symbol years ago. Only a handful of people had ever used it. She quickly folded the paper again, as someone knocked on the door. "Nora." It was Dr. Ethan Brooks. "You all right?" She forced a smile. "Just organizing supplies. If you're finished, Director Collins needs everyone in the main atrium." "I'm coming." If you're enjoying this original story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Every bit of support helps us create more original stories with heart and mystery. The hospital atrium had transformed into a small event hall. Rows of chairs were filled with veterans, nurses, doctors, and local community leaders. Television cameras pointed toward a simple wooden stage. General Carter stepped to the microphone. "Today is not about buildings," he began. "It is about people." The audience became silent. "We can build the finest hospitals in the country, but healing always begins with compassion." Everyone applauded. Nora stood quietly near the back wall, hoping to stay unnoticed. General Carter continued speaking about rehabilitation, teamwork, and the importance of caring for those who had sacrificed so much. While everyone watched the stage, no one noticed the maintenance worker entering a restricted hallway nearby. The man called Daniel walked calmly, carrying his toolbox as if he belonged there. He greeted two employees with a friendly smile. Neither questioned him. He stopped beside an electrical access panel and looked around. The hallway was empty. From inside his toolbox, he removed a small electronic device no larger than a mobile phone. He connected it to the panel for only a few seconds. A tiny green light appeared, then disappeared. He quietly packed everything away. No sparks. No loud noises. No signs that anything had happened. He simply continued walking. Back in the atrium, General Carter finished his speech. The audience stood and applauded warmly. As reporters gathered around him for interviews, Director Margaret Collins approached Nora. "Nora, could you please escort Mr. Lawson back to rehabilitation?" "Of course." Nora wheeled the elderly veteran toward the elevators. Mr. Lawson smiled. "You don't like crowds very much." She laughed softly. "I like people." "Big difference." "It is." "You were hiding during the ceremony." "I was working." "You always have an answer." She smiled without replying. The elevator doors opened. Inside stood General Carter. Only one security officer accompanied him. "Mind if I join you?" the general asked politely. "Not at all," Nora answered. The doors closed. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Mr. Lawson finally broke the silence. "General, this nurse is the best one in the whole hospital." General Carter smiled. "I've already noticed she's very dedicated." He looked toward Nora again. "I still have the strange feeling we've crossed paths before." Nora kept her eyes on the elevator numbers. "I've worked here for 6 years. I wasn't thinking about the hospital." She remained silent. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor. Mr. Lawson was wheeled out by another therapist, leaving Nora and General Carter alone. Before the doors closed again, the general quietly asked, "Have you ever worked in emergency rescue?" Nora's fingers tightened around the wheelchair handles. "A long time ago." "I thought so." The elevator reached the fourth floor. General Carter stepped out. Before leaving, he said one sentence that stayed with Nora. Some people spend their lives running from yesterday. He smiled gently. But yesterday usually finds us. The doors closed. Nora stood motionless. The words felt almost connected to the mysterious note. At the same time, deep inside the hospital basement, the man calling himself Daniel entered a locked storage room using a copied access card. He removed his maintenance cap. His calm expression disappeared. Pinned inside his locker door was an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Rescue helicopter crash claims 4 heroes during mountain relief mission." Daniel stared at the picture for several seconds. One face had been circled in black ink. Not the pilot. Not the medic. Not the commander. Only one face. Nora Hayes. Daniel whispered quietly, "They called you a hero." His expression hardened. But they never told the whole story. He carefully folded the newspaper and returned it to the locker. Then he looked at his watch. Phase 2. He closed the locker door. Upstairs, Nora suddenly stopped walking. A strange feeling washed over her. Almost as if someone she had never met already knew everything about her. Outside the hospital, dark clouds covered the sun once again. The first distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. No one realized that before the storm ended, long-buried secrets would finally begin to surface. Nora remained frozen in the hallway long after the elevator doors had closed. General Carter's final words echoed inside her mind. Yesterday usually finds us. She took a slow breath and continued toward the rehabilitation wing, convincing herself that she was simply overthinking. But deep inside, she knew something unusual had already begun. As she rounded the corner, she noticed Ben, the security guard, speaking into his radio with an unusually serious expression. The moment he saw Nora, he forced a smile. "Everything okay?" she asked. Ben nodded. "Probably just a technical issue. Some security cameras on the lower level went offline for a minute. They're working now? Most of them." His answer sounded confident. His eyes did not. Meanwhile, beneath the hospital, Daniel calmly walked through a maintenance corridor carrying his toolbox. He stopped beside a locked utility room. From his pocket, he removed a small notebook. Every hallway was carefully drawn by hand. Several routes were crossed out with blue ink. Only one remained. He looked toward a metal ventilation shaft. "Perfect," he whispered. He quietly opened the toolbox. Inside were ordinary repair tools. A flashlight. Electrical tape. A portable radio. And an old silver key with the image of a lighthouse engraved on it. Daniel stared at the key for several seconds before placing it back inside. His expression softened. This should have ended years ago. He closed the toolbox and disappeared into the narrow service passage. Upstairs, Nora helped patients prepare for afternoon therapy sessions. A little boy named Oliver waited beside his grandfather's wheelchair. He couldn't have been older than 8. He looked nervous. Is Grandpa going to be okay? Nora knelt so she could speak at eye level. He has already become much stronger. But he still walks slowly. She smiled. Walking slowly is still moving forward. Oliver thought for a moment. My teacher says brave people aren't scared. Nora gently shook her head. I've met many brave people. Were they scared? Every single one. Then why were they brave? Because they kept going anyway. Oliver smiled. I want to be like that. I think you already are. The boy proudly took his grandfather's hand. Across the room, several nurses quietly watched the conversation. One whispered, "She always knows exactly what people need to hear." He simply said it was important. Nora hesitated. I'll meet him. Before either woman could continue, every light in the hallway blinked once. Then again, the emergency generator automatically switched on. Several patients looked around in confusion. Within seconds, normal power returned. Hospital staff relaxed. Someone joked, "Guess maintenance is earning their paycheck today." Everyone laughed. Everyone except Nora. Something about the timing felt wrong. Far below the hospital, Daniel quietly watched the electrical monitor inside the maintenance room. A tiny green light changed to amber. He smiled. Exactly as planned. He picked up his radio. This is Unit 3. A calm voice answered through static. Status. Testing complete. Any problems? None. Proceed. The transmission ended. Daniel removed the radio battery and slipped it into his pocket. No one would be able to trace the signal. At exactly the same moment, General Carter stood alone inside a small conference room overlooking the hospital gardens. Rain tapped gently against the windows. He held an old photograph in his hands. The edges were worn with age. Several people stood together beside a rescue helicopter. One young woman smiled confidently at the camera. Her face looked remarkably familiar. General Carter quietly compared the photograph with the nurse he had met only minutes earlier. He whispered to himself, "It can't be." A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. The door slowly opened. Nora stepped inside. You wanted to see me, General? He smiled politely. Please, have a seat. Nora sat across from him. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, General Carter placed the old photograph on the table, without saying a single word. He slowly turned it toward Nora. The color drained from her face. She recognized the picture instantly. It had been taken nearly 12 years earlier. And somehow, the general had it. Outside the conference room, hidden at the far end of the hallway. Daniel silently watched through a partially open service door. A faint smile appeared on his face. The truth, he whispered, is finally catching up. Nora stared at the old photograph lying on the table. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. The smiling young woman wearing a bright orange rescue jacket looked almost like a stranger now. She remembered that day. The clear blue sky. The rescue helicopter. The laughter before takeoff. A day that had started with hope. A day that ended with heartbreak. General Carter watched her carefully. I knew I had seen your face before. Nora slowly picked up the photograph. Where did you get this? A retired rescue pilot gave it to me several years ago. She traced one finger across the faded picture. There were 6 of us that day. I know. General Carter's voice became softer. Only 2 survived. The room fell silent. Nora carefully placed the photograph back onto the table. I don't talk about those days anymore. You don't have to. But I think you've been carrying that weight alone for far too long. Nora looked out the rain-covered window. Some memories aren't meant to be shared. If they continue hurting you, they already do. General Carter folded his hands. I've spent years meeting veterans, firefighters, police officers, and rescue workers. They all carry invisible scars. Nora nodded. The hardest ones are the ones nobody can see. He smiled gently. You still help people every single day. That doesn't erase yesterday. No. It gives yesterday a purpose. Those words stayed with her. For the first time in years. Someone understood without asking painful questions. Just then, a loud knock interrupted the conversation. Director Margaret Collins entered quickly. I'm sorry to interrupt. What happened? General Carter asked. The hospital network has gone down. Completely? Patient records, internal phones, security cameras. Everything is offline. Nora immediately stood. Any emergency patients? Several. We'll switch to manual procedures. General Carter watched Nora. The sadness disappeared from her face. In its place came calm focus. She moved toward the door without hesitation. Some people froze during emergencies. Nora became stronger. Across the hospital, confusion spread rapidly. Doctors began writing notes by hand. Nurses searched paper charts. Technicians restarted equipment. The help desk received dozens of calls within minutes. Ben hurried toward the security office. We've lost every camera on the lower floors. An officer frowned. Power issue? No. Disabled the network. Meanwhile, deep beneath the hospital. Take care of people. And the computers? They can wait. Within minutes, everyone had clear responsibilities. Patients continued receiving treatment. No panique. No confusión. Only teamwork. Dr. Ethan Brooks smiled. I don't know how you stay so calm, Nora replied without looking up. When people look to you for hope, you don't have time to panic. Suddenly, a hospital volunteer rushed into the room. Nurse Nora. What is it? Mr. Lawson is missing. The room became silent. What do you mean missing? He left physical therapy 10 minutes ago. Nobody has seen him since. Director Collins immediately looked toward security. No cameras. Ben Solinadid. They're still offline. Nora felt something tighten inside her chest. Mr. Lawson couldn't walk far without assistance. He would never simply disappear. Not on his own. At exactly the same moment, Daniel quietly stood at the end of a deserted service corridor. Around the corner, an elderly wheelchair sat waiting. Inside it, Mr. Lawson looked frightened but unharmed. Daniel crouched beside him. I'm sorry you had to be part of this. Mr. Lawson looked confused. Who are you? Someone trying to finish something that should have been finished years ago. He gently covered the old man's knees with a blanket. I promise. No one is here to hurt you. Then he looked toward the ceiling, toward the busy hospital above. Now, they'll finally start looking in the right place. Several floors above, Nora had no idea that someone she cared deeply about had become part of a carefully planned mystery. And for the first time that day, she realized this was no longer just a technical failure. Someone inside St. Gabriel Veterans Medical Center was making every move for a reason. The real game had only just begun. The announcement spread through St. Gabriel Veterans Medical Center faster than anyone expected. Mr. Henry Lawson was missing. Doctors paused in the hallways. Therapists checked every treatment room. Security officers searched every floor. Within minutes, the hospital that had been filled with calm determination became a place of quiet urgency. Nora stood in the middle of the rehabilitation wing, thinking carefully instead of reacting emotionally. She looked at Ben. When was he last seen? About 10 minutes ago. Was he alone? For less than a minute. Who was nearby? Ben hesitated. A maintenance worker was repairing lights outside the therapy room. Nora's eyes narrowed. Do you know his name? Ben shook his head. I'll find out. Nora didn't waste another second. Let's search floor by floor. No rusing. No panique. If Mr. Lawson is frightened, we don't want to scare him even more. Everyone immediately began following her instructions. Meanwhile, Daniel slowly pushed Mr. Lawson's wheelchair through an old service tunnel that hadn't been used in years. The elderly veteran looked confused. You said no one wanted to hurt me. I meant it. Then why bring me here? Daniel stopped. Because you're the only person who remembers something that everyone else has forgotten. Mr. Lawson frowned. I don't understand. You will. Daniel handed him a bottle of water. I'm sorry you were pulled into this. Mr. Lawson studied the stranger's face. You don't seem like a bad man. Daniel looked away. I wasn't always. Back upstairs, General Adrian Carter joined the search. Director Collins handed him a printed map. We've checked patient rooms, waiting areas, cafeterias, and both gardens. What about service corridors? They're being searched now. General Carter nodded. He noticed Nora standing quietly near the information desk. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't running. She was observing, watching, listening. He walked over. What are you thinking? Nora looked toward the ceiling. People usually make mistakes. And whoever planned this hasn't. You think it was planned? Ido. What makes you so certain? She pointed toward the elevators. They disabled cameras. They chose one patient. They disappeared without causing panic. She paused. That isn't random. General Carter slowly smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Ben suddenly hurried toward them. Nora, what did you find? The maintenance schedule. She quickly took the clipboard. Every technician's name was listed. Except one. There should be 5 workers today, Ben said. I only recognize 4. General Carter looked at the page. So one identity doesn't match. Ben nodded. We checked human resources. No employee with that badge number exists. Nora immediately understood. The maintenance worker was never part of the hospital. At that exact moment, Daniel reached an old storage room hidden behind unused equipment. He carefully helped Mr. Lawson inside. I'm afraid we'll have to stay here a little longer. Mr. Lawson looked around. Dust-covered old shelves. Broken wheelchairs leaned against the walls. Sunlight slipped through a tiny window near the ceiling. Daniel handed him a warm blanket. Comfortable. As comfortable as anyone can be in a storage room. Daniel smiled faintly. You've still got your sense of humor. Mr. Lawson looked closely at him. Have we met before? Daniel froze. For just 1 second. No. I think we have. You don't remember. Should I? Daniel quietly sat on an old wooden crate. My father used to work with rescue teams. Mr. Lawson searched his memory. Your father? He believed heroes always told the truth. Daniel lowered his eyes. When he died, I discovered that heroes can hide things too. Back upstairs. Nora entered the hospital archives. Thousands of maintenance records filled long metal shelves. A young administrator looked surprised. Nora? I need visitor logs for the last month. That's a lot of paperwork. I know. The administrator quickly began helping. Together they searched page after page. Nearly 20 minutes passed. Finally, Nora stopped turning pages. There. The administrator leaned closer. What is it? Nora pointed toward a handwritten signature. The same handwriting. Where? This visitor signed 3 different names. The administrator looked shocked. You're right. So he's been inside this hospital before. More than once. General Carter entered the room just as Nora closed the file. What did you find? She looked directly at him. Our visitor didn't appear today. He's been preparing this for weeks. Before anyone could respond, every light in the archive room suddenly went out. Complete darkness filled the room. Someone gasped. Emergency lights slowly flickered to life. A hospital-wide announcement echoed through the building. Attention all staff. All entrances have been temporarily locked as a security precaution. Please remain calm and await further instructions. Silence followed. Nora looked toward the hallway. Then at General Carter. This isn't over. General Carter nodded. No. It has only entered its next stage. Several floors below. Daniel quietly heard the announcement through an old speaker. He looked at his watch. Then toward Mr. Lawson. The doors are locked. Mr. Lawson asked softly. What? Daniel stood up and picked up his toolbox. Now. He looked toward the ceiling with quiet determination. Nora Hayes starts asking the questions I came here to make her ask. And for the first time since arriving at St. Gabriel Veterans Medical Center, Daniel stepped out of the shadows willingly. He wanted to be found, because the truth he carried could no longer stay hidden. The heavy steel door groaned as Nora slowly pushed it open. A cold wave of air drifted out from the forgotten records vault. Dust floated through the beam of Ben's flashlight, while General Adrian Carter stepped inside beside her. The room had clearly been abandoned for years. Old filing cabinets lined the walls. Broken chairs lay scattered across the floor. Water dripped steadily from a cracked pipe somewhere in the darkness. Then a calm voice echoed through the room. I've been expecting you. Everyone immediately turned. Daniel stepped forward from the shadows. He wasn't hiding anymore. He stood calmly with a worn notebook in one hand and a thick investigation file in the other. Security officers raised their hands. Don't move. Daniel slowly placed both items on a nearby table and lifted his empty hands. I'm not here to fight. Ben looked surprised. Then why do all this? Daniel answered quietly. Because no one would have listened if I simply walked through the front door. Nora took one careful step forward. You took Mr. Lawson. I did. Is he safe? Yes. I never intended to harm him. Then why involve him? Daniel looked toward the old investigation file. Because he remembers the day everyone else tried to forget. General Carter studied him carefully. You've planned this for weeks. For years. Daniel nodded. 12 years. The room became completely silent. Daniel slowly opened the weathered notebook. My father was Michael Reed. Nora searched her memory. The name sounded familiar. Daniel continued. He was the chief maintenance engineer responsible for inspecting rescue helicopters. General Carter's expression suddenly changed. I remember him. But my father spent the rest of his life saying the helicopter had passed every inspection. No one believed him. He died carrying that burden. Nora stared at the photograph. For years she had accepted the official report without question. She quietly asked, "Why tell me now?" Daniel looked directly at her. "Because I found something my father hid before he died." He opened the notebook. Inside were inspection notes, repair records, and handwritten observations. One page stood out. It described an emergency warning light that had briefly malfunctioned during a severe storm. Another page explained that the problem had been repaired and tested successfully before the rescue mission. General Carter slowly read the entries. "This changes everything." Daniel shook his head. "No. It simply tells the truth." Nora opened the confidential investigation file. Many pages contained heavy black markings where information had once been hidden. Near the back was a signed statement from an independent aviation inspector. The statement explained that weather conditions had changed dramatically within minutes, creating dangerous air currents that no pilot could have predicted. The inspector had found no evidence that poor maintenance caused the crash. Nora looked up. Then why wasn't this made public? General Carter answered quietly. At the time, officials wanted one simple explanation. They believed blaming a mechanical problem would calm public fear. Daniel lowered his head. And my father paid the price. Nobody spoke. The silence felt heavier than any argument. Finally, Nora walked toward Daniel. "I spent years believing I survived because I was lucky." Daniel looked at her. "My father believed you survived because you refused to give up." She felt tears fill her eyes. "I wish I had met him. He admired every member of your rescue team." Daniel smiled sadly. "He never blamed any of you. He only wanted the truth." At that moment, Ben's radio crackled. "We found Mr. Lawson. He's safe." A wave of relief spread across the room. Daniel quietly smiled. "I promised he wouldn't be harmed." General Carter stepped closer. "You could have handled this differently." "I know." Daniel looked around the forgotten vault. But after 12 years of unanswered letters, no one opened the door. So I created a reason. Ben gently placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You'll still have to answer for what you did." Daniel nodded. "I expected that. I just didn't want my father remembered as a man who failed." Nora reached for the old notebook. "We'll make sure he's remembered for the truth." Several weeks later, an independent review officially cleared Michael Reed's name. The hospital created a permanent exhibit honoring rescue workers, emergency engineers, pilots, and every unseen professional whose work protected lives behind the scenes. Daniel accepted responsibility for his actions, but also received recognition for uncovering evidence that had been ignored for years. Mr. Lawson returned to rehabilitation, joking that he never wanted another unexpected adventure. General Adrian Carter helped establish a scholarship in Michael Reed's memory for young aviation safety engineers. And Nora? She continued working at St. Gabriel Veterans Medical Center. She remained the same quiet nurse who greeted every patient with kindness. But something inside her had changed. For the first time in 12 years, she no longer carried yesterday alone. On the wall of the new memorial room hung a simple bronze plaque. It read, "Real heroes are not remembered because they are perfect. They are remembered because they choose compassion, even after carrying pain." Every morning, Nora paused for just a moment before beginning her shift. She looked at the plaque. She smiled. Then she walked into another hospital room, ready to help the next person who needed hope. Because sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't surviving the past. It's choosing kindness every single day afterward.